Snow fell soft and steady over Millhaven the morning Sheriff Whitmore slid the folder across his desk. Ethan didn't need to open it to know what it was. Everyone in town knew the name. Clara Bennett. Missing 3 years. Case never closed, Whitmore said, voice low. Family wants one more search before the anniversary. You know these woods better than anyone left on the force. Ethan opened the folder. Her photograph looked back at him. A young woman standing at the edge of Ashgrove Creek, laughing at something outside the frame. He studied her eyes longer than he meant to. Last seen near Sable Ridge, he read aloud.
No straggle.
No tracks past the tree line. Like she walked into the snow and the forest just kept her. Some folks say she's dead, Whitmore said. Others say she just wanted to disappear. Ethan closed the folder, feeling the weight of it settle somewhere behind his ribs. A familiar ache he usually kept buried. He'd failed to bring someone home once before. He wasn't sure he could survive failing again. I'll head out at first light, he said. That night, as wind rattled the cabin windows, he found himself staring at her photograph long after he should have slept. Unable to shake the feeling that this search was going to cost him something he hadn't lost yet. Dawn broke pale and colorless as Ethan set out toward Sable Ridge, boots crunching over fresh powder. The forest was silent in that particular way winter silenced things, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. He followed the old search grid marked in Clara's file, though he doubted it would lead anywhere new. 3 years of storms had erased whatever trail she'd left behind. Near an old fire marker, half buried beneath a drift, something caught his eye. A corner of leather, dark against the white. He knelt and dug it free with gloved hands. A journal, weathered, swollen with old moisture, its cover cracked but intact. He turned it over carefully, half expecting a name. Instead, stitched faintly into the leather, were 3 initials. CB. His breath caught. He should have bagged it as evidence, radioed it in, followed procedure to the letter. Instead, he found himself sitting on a fallen log, peeling the cover open despite the cold biting through his gloves. The first page was dated 4 days before she vanished. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, like each word had been chosen with weight. I don't know who you are yet, it began, but I think you're the one who's supposed to find me. Ethan's hands went still on the page. Somewhere above him, a raven called out across the ridge, and for the first time in years, he felt the forest was watching him back. Ethan read the page 3 times before he trusted himself to turn it. I don't know who you are yet, but I think you're the one who's supposed to find me. I started imagining you, quiet, patient, the kind of person who notices things others walk past. Maybe that's foolish. Maybe I'm just talking to snow. But it helps, pretending someone out there is listening. He closed the journal, heart beating strangely fast for a man who spent his life staying calm in emergencies. It was just a coincidence. Grief did strange things to language. She'd been writing to an idea, not a person. Not him. Still, he opened it again. The next entry was shorter, dated the day before she disappeared. Marcus knows I've been asking questions. I need to disappear before he finds out how much I know. If someone ever reads this, if you ever read this, I didn't run because I was lost. I ran because staying would have destroyed me. Ethan sat up straighter. This wasn't the account of a woman who wandered off in confusion. This was someone who had planned to vanish, deliberately, carefully, afraid of a man named Marcus. The official file said no signs of foul play, no suspects named. He looked up at the tree line, snow drifting lazily between the pines, and felt the case shift beneath him. From a search for a lost woman to something far more dangerous. Somewhere out there, Clara Bennett hadn't disappeared. She'd escaped. Ethan spent the walk back to his truck, turning her words over like stones in his pocket. I need to disappear before he finds out how much I know. Not the language of an accident. The language of a plan. Back at the station, he didn't mention the journal to Whitmore. Not yet. Something told him this wasn't ready for a file number and an evidence bag. That night, by lamplight, he read further. There's an old outpost past Ashgrove Creek, near the collapsed footbridge. No one uses it anymore, not since the service stopped firewatch rotations. If I disappear, that's where I'll go. It's the only place Marcus doesn't know about. Ethan sat back, pulse quickening. He knew that outpost. He'd passed it a dozen times on patrol, always assuming it long abandoned, walls sagging under decades of snow. He pictured Clara there, 26 years old, alone in the dark, 3 winters running. It didn't seem possible. No one survived that long isolated in Ashgrove's cold without help, without supplies, without being seen. And yet, he thought of the search records. No tracks past the tree line, and wondered now if that wasn't because she'd vanished into nothing, but because she'd known exactly how to disappear into everything. By morning, he'd made his decision. He wouldn't radio it in. Not yet. He needed to see the outpost with his own eyes first, before anyone else had the chance to find her before he did. The footbridge was worse than Ethan remembered. Half its planks rotted through, the rest sagging under years of snowmelt and freeze. He crossed carefully, boots testing each board before trusting his weight. Beyond it, half swallowed by pine and drift, stood the old fire outpost. Its windows were dark, shutters hanging loose, but as Ethan approached, something made him slow his steps. Smoke, thin and gray, curling faintly from the crooked stone chimney. His hand instinctively found the radio at his belt, then stopped. He didn't call it in. He moved closer, quieter now, senses sharpened the way they'd been trained to be. The snow around the door was packed down, not fresh but used, the unmistakable pattern of boots that had walked this path many times before. A small stack of firewood, neatly split, sat under the eave, dry and shielded from snow. Beside it, a wire snare, expertly set, meant for rabbits. No one survives out here by accident, he thought. This was someone who had built a life in the margins of the forest, careful, deliberate, practiced. He knocked once against the doorframe, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Forest Service. I'm not here to hurt you. Silence answered him, the kind that told him someone inside was listening, holding perfectly still. Then, faint through the door, he heard it. The soft, unmistakable sound of someone stepping quickly away from a window. She was here, and she had heard him. Ethan didn't force the door. Something told him that if Clara Bennett had survived 3 winters alone, she hadn't done it by being cornered easily. I found your journal, he called out instead, voice carrying into the stillness. Near the old fire marker. I read what you wrote about Marcus, about disappearing. Nothing moved inside, but he sensed her there, close to the door, listening. I'm not going to report this, he said. Not yet. I just want to know you're safe. Still no answer. After a long moment, he stepped back from the door and did something that surprised even him. He set the journal down gently on the frost-covered step, weighing it with a stone so the wind wouldn't take it. Then he retreated toward the tree line, giving her the space she clearly needed, and waited. 20 minutes passed before the door creaked open, just enough for a hand to reach out and take the journal back inside. He caught only a glimpse. Pale fingers, quick and careful, gone before he could see more. That night, back at his cabin, Ethan opened his own notebook and, without quite understanding why, began to write. If you're reading this, I'm not here to take anything from you. I just don't think you should have to survive this alone anymore. He didn't know if she'd ever read it, but some part of him needed her to know someone finally had. 3 days passed before Ethan returned to the outpost. He told himself it was procedure, checking on a potential witness, nothing more. But procedure didn't explain the folded page tucked carefully inside his coat pocket. Words he'd rewritten a dozen times before he was satisfied. The clearing was quiet when he arrived, snow undisturbed except for a single set of footprints leading to the stone step, and back again. His note was gone. In its place lay something new. A torn page from her journal, weighed down with the same careful stone. His hands weren't quite steady as he unfolded it. I stopped believing anyone would come. It was easier that way, safer. You weren't supposed to be real. I don't know what to do with that. Below it, in smaller, more hesitant handwriting, she'd added one more line. Don't come back tomorrow. Come back in 3 days. I need to decide if I trust you. Ethan read it twice, then folded it carefully and pressed it flat against his chest. as if that might keep the words from fading. 3 days. He could give her that. But as he turned to leave, something in the snow near the tree line caught his eye. Boot prints, larger than Clara's, half covered by fresh drift. Fresh enough to have been made within the last day. Someone else had found their way to the outpost. And judging by the direction of the prints, they hadn't come to help her. Ethan crouched beside the tracks, studying them the way he'd been trained to read the forest. Depth, spacing, the drag of a heel favoring one side. A man's boots, size 11, maybe 12, walking with purpose, not wandering. Whoever they belonged to hadn't stumbled onto this clearing by accident. He followed the prints a short distance before they veered off toward the ridge road. The same road, he realized with a cold twist in his gut, that led back toward Millhaven. Back at his truck, he pulled the case file and reread the name that had haunted Clara's journal entries. Marcus Reyes. A name that appeared nowhere in the official missing persons report, but everywhere in her private words. He drove straight to the station and searched the county records, keeping his questions vague enough not to draw Whitmore's attention. It didn't take long to find him. Marcus Reyes, 36. Address in the next county over. A record of 2 restraining order requests filed against him years ago, both mysteriously withdrawn before they reached a judge. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone had pressured her into silence once already. And now those same boots were walking within a mile of where she was hiding. He thought of the 3 days she'd asked him to wait, of trust being something she measured out like rationed food. But some dangers didn't wait for trust to be earned. That night, Ethan sat by his window long after the lamp burned low, watching the tree lean, and made a decision that broke every rule he'd sworn to follow. He wasn't waiting 3 days. He was going back tomorrow. Snow was falling harder than it had in weeks when Ethan reached the outpost the next morning, visibility thinning to shapes and shadows. He knew he was breaking her trust before it had even fully formed. But the boot prints in the snow had changed the math of waiting. He knocked once, firmer than before. Clara, it's not safe to wait 3 days. Someone else has been near the outpost. I think it might be Marcus. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door opened. She stood in the frame, smaller than her photograph had suggested, wrapped in a flannel jacket too large for her frame, auburn hair loose beneath a wool cap. Her hazel eyes studied him with a wariness that had clearly kept her alive. "You shouldn't have come back early," she said, voice rough from disuse. "I know," Ethan said, "but I couldn't risk him finding you before I warned you." Something in her expression flickered. Not quite trust, but the beginning of it. She stepped back, wordlessly allowing him just inside the doorway, out of the snow. The inside of the outpost was small, sparse, but lived in. A cot, a wood stove, shelves lined with jars of preserved food, and on a narrow table, a stack of journals, years' worth, filled with the same careful handwriting. "You really read all of it?" she said, following his gaze. "Every word," Ethan admitted. "I think some part of you knew someone eventually would." Clara's eyes met his, unguarded for the first time. "I think some part of me was writing it for exactly this moment." Outside, the wind howled against the walls. But for the first time in 3 years, Clara Bennett wasn't facing the winter alone. They sat by the wood stove as the storm thickened outside, the outpost's small window fogged with cold. Clara wrapped both hands around a tin cup of pine needle tea, watching Ethan with the careful eyes of someone still deciding how much of herself to hand over. "Marcus wasn't just controlling," she said finally. "He was connected. People in town who owed him favors, who'd look the other way if I ever tried to leave properly. I realized the only way to actually disappear was to really disappear. No goodbye. No trail. The search team said there were no tracks past the tree line," Ethan said. Faint, tired smile. "I walked backward through my own footprints for almost a mile before I cut toward the creek. Bought myself hours before anyone thought to look here." Ethan felt something between admiration and heartbreak. 3 years. Alone. "Not lonely the way you'd think," she said. "The forest doesn't lie to you, doesn't perform kindness it doesn't mean. After Marcus, that mattered more than people did." "Then why write to someone who didn't exist?" Clara looked at him for a long moment, firelight catching the uncertainty in her eyes. Because some nights the silence got too heavy to carry alone. I needed to believe someone somewhere might understand, even if they never came. I came, Ethan said quietly. I know, she said. I just don't know yet what to do with that. Outside, the storm pressed harder against the walls. But between them, something fragile and new had begun to take root. The storm hadn't broken by nightfall, and Ethan made the call to stay, not from procedure but instinct. Something about the boot prints from days before gnawed at him, a warning he couldn't shake. He was right to listen to it. Near midnight, the fox that often circled the outpost let out a sharp, panicked bark from somewhere near the tree line. Clara went still, her whole body tensing in a way that told Ethan this wasn't the first time an animal's warning had meant danger. He's found the road, she whispered. He always said he'd know if I ever came back into these woods. Ethan moved to the window, scanning the storm-blurred dark. A flashlight beam, faint but unmistakable, swept along the ridge road above the creek. Stay low, he said, away from the windows. His hand found his radio, hesitating only a second before pressing the call button. Whatever trust he'd been building with Clara mattered less now than keeping her alive. Dispatch, this is Ranger Cole. I need backup at the old fire outpost, east of Ashgrove Creek. Possible trespasser, connected to an active investigation. Clara's eyes widened. You're not supposed to. I know, Ethan said, but I'm done choosing rules over you. The flashlight beam paused near the footbridge, hovering, searching. Then it began moving toward the outpost. Ethan positioned himself between Clara and the door, heart hammering, every instinct sharpened to a single, unshakable purpose. Whatever happened next, he wasn't letting Marcus take her again. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Clara, Marcus's voice called low and cold. I know you're in there. Did you really think you could hide forever? Ethan stepped forward, opening the door just enough to block the frame. Forest Service. You're trespassing on federal land. Turn around and leave. Marcus's eyes flicked past him, searching the dark room. This isn't your business, Ranger. She is, Ethan said, voice steady as stone. And backup's already on the way. Headlights flickered through the trees moments later. Whitmore's truck, cutting through the storm faster than Ethan expected. Marcus's expression shifted from anger to calculation to retreat as red and blue light spilled across the snow. He didn't wait for the confrontation to finish. By the time Whitmore reached the outpost, Marcus was already gone, tire tracks vanishing into the storm, though not for long. With Clara's statement, and years of buried evidence finally coming to light, it wouldn't take long to find him again. Weeks later, snow still blanketed Ashgrove, but softer now, quieter. Clara stood at the edge of the creek where her photograph had once been taken, no longer running, no longer hiding. 3 years, she said, watching the water move beneath the ice. I never thought I'd stand here again. You don't have to disappear anymore, Ethan said. Clara turned to him, something unguarded and warm in her hazel eyes. I know. I finally have somewhere I want to be found. She reached into her coat and handed him a small, new journal, its first page already filled with her handwriting. To Ethan, the one who finally came. For the first time in years, the forest around them felt less like a place people disappeared into, and more like a place someone could finally be known.